Good morning and welcome. You're watching the early morning Stylo News Intelligence Update for June 3, 2026. I'm your host, and today we're turning our focus to a region that is, frankly, under immense, multifaceted pressure right now, and that's West Africa. Our goal this morning is to calmly and thoroughly look at the facts on the ground, delivering a clear, objective assessment of the forces currently shaping Mali, Niger, and Nigeria. So let's get right to it. The bottom line up front for today's briefing is this. Regional security across the Sahel and neighboring coastal states is experiencing a really rapid and complex deterioration. Before we get into the specifics of those events, we do want to quickly acknowledge our sponsor, ProWave AI. They're the developers behind Stylo Intel Ops, which is an incredible AI-powered open-source intelligence program, as well as Stylo News, the commercial version you can grab right now on the web and through their mobile apps. All right, here's our structure for today. We'll start with a high-level West Africa briefing, then map out the actual security situation on the ground. From there, we'll look at cascading regional impacts, analyze the strategic perspectives of leadership, and wrap up with a look at public sentiment and our future outlook. Starting us off with Part 1, the West Africa briefing. Over the last 2 weeks, a very clear pattern has emerged. We're tracking escalating crises across Mali, Niger, and Nigeria. And it's important to understand these aren't just isolated incidents. They're deeply interconnected events that really underscore a rapidly shifting geopolitical landscape. You've got Western forces withdrawing, established security frameworks completely dissolving, and simultaneously a rise in both militant insurgencies and transnational criminal networks. All of this is actively redrawing the map of influence and stability in the region. To really understand those shifts, let's move right into Section 2, the regional security situation. Geographically speaking, the recent events are heavily concentrated in 3 main theaters. First, in Mali, we're seeing jihadist expansion moving aggressively, actually reaching the diplomatic district and transport corridors right near the capital, Bamako. Moving east into Niger, there are documented threats to critical infrastructure, especially around the Agadem oil basin, and that's being compounded by cross-border tensions with Chad. And finally, down south in Nigeria, the theater is just as active. We're seeing joint U.S.-Nigeria counterterrorism strikes in the Borno State region near Lake Chad, targeting entrenched militant strongholds. Now, if we look at the timeline here, it paints a picture of a rapidly evolving security vacuum. Back in April 2026, coordinated attacks actually breached the Malian capital, Bamako, which tragically resulted in the death of the nation's defense minister. Then in May, a major tactical development in Nigeria, a joint U.S.-Nigerian strike successfully took out Abu Bilal al-Manuki, the global second-in-command of the Islamic State. And right around that same time in May, authorities in Nigeria seized a record amount of cocaine, which signals an increasingly emboldened criminal element operating right alongside the militancy. Which brings us to a very dangerous intersection: armed militancy overlapping directly with transnational drug trafficking. It's really a two-front challenge. On one side, insurgents are exploiting ungoverned spaces. On the other, organized crime syndicates are moving massive quantities of narcotics, like that unprecedented 268-kilogram cocaine seizure we just mentioned in Zinder, Niger. Intelligence points to these networks operating in parallel and potentially even in tandem, which obviously severely compounds the challenge for regional authorities. Okay, having established those tactical realities, let's turn to Section 3, the impacts and cascading effects. The fallout from all this isn't contained. It ripples outward at every level of society. On a local level, the human toll is just profound. We're seeing severe civilian displacements, fuel blockades near major cities like Bamako, and understandably, a lot of deep community fear, especially following the recent abduction of over 45 schoolchildren in Oyo State, Nigeria. Nationally, governments are reacting by consolidating military power and shifting strategies, like Nigeria bringing in a new special advisor on homeland security. And internationally, the landscape is defined by the withdrawal of traditional European forces, the dissolution of the G5 Sahel, and a very targeted increase in U.S. military and intelligence aid. To put the human impact of these shifting borders into perspective, consider this number: 1,100. On May 22nd, over 1,100 Nigerian migrants who had been stranded in Agadez, Niger, were returned to Kano State. This mass movement is a direct consequence of the deteriorating security environment and the new political alignments forming after the recent military transitions across the Sahel. So, how are the key decision-makers responding to these cascading crises? Let's examine that in Section 4, Leadership Perspectives and Strategy. Looking impartially at the regional strategies, we see some widely diverging approaches. General Assimi Goïta's military government in Mali is responding by highly centralizing military power, really putting regime stability and sovereignty ahead of democratic transitions. Conversely, President Bola Tinubu's government in Nigeria is tackling internal and border threats by leaning into offensive counterterrorism collaboration with the United States. Meanwhile, intelligence reports suggest the Chadian government is taking an entirely different route, reportedly arming proxy rebel groups to put pressure on Niger's current administration. Now, zeroing in on that U.S. and Nigeria strategic partnership, those operations have definitely yielded significant tactical results, like the elimination of the IS leader we mentioned earlier. And that's being supported by increased intelligence sharing and the deployment of Homeland Security advisors. But it is our duty to report the full picture here. These intensified strikes have also sparked localized concerns regarding civilian casualties. So leadership is having to navigate a very complex balance between tactical military success and serious humanitarian considerations. Of course, we also have to factor in the voice of the public. Let's move to Section 5, Public Sentiment and Outlook. When we analyze open-source intelligence from social media and the regional press, what we find is a deeply divided public sentiment. Sentiment A shows very strong support for decisive anti-terror military actions. A lot of voices are championing Pan-African military sovereignty and applauding the strict anti-corruption measures taken by transitional governments. But Sentiment B stands in stark contrast. There's widespread alarm over the collateral damage of airstrikes, profound concerns about democratic backsliding, and a deep skepticism toward any foreign military presence, whether Western or otherwise. The public desperately wants stability, but they are highly wary of the costs. Based on all these facts and sentiments, our intelligence forecast suggests you keep a close eye on a few key things in the coming weeks. First, the stability of the Agadim oil fields in Niger, since they remain a prime target for proxy conflicts. Second, the effectiveness of emerging cross-border intelligence sharing operations. Third, the continuation and the potential public fallout of the U.S.-Nigeria joint strikes. And finally, watch for any diplomatic efforts by ECOWAS to try and re-engage with Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. And that brings us to Section 6, concluding the analytical portion of today's briefing. This complex web of internal strife and shifting alliances leaves the region at a very critical juncture. And it brings us to this essential question. As insurgencies and alliances shift, will regional fragmentation ultimately outpace collective security? For a much deeper contextual dive into these exact issues, I highly encourage you to check out our full-length audio podcast titled West Africa Under Pressure, Mali, Niger, and Nigeria in Focus. You can listen to it right now on your favorite audio channel or just follow the link attached to this post. And for AI-powered, facts-driven news on demand, be sure to subscribe and visit us at www.stylonews.com. I've been your host, thanking you so much for joining us this morning. Have a highly informed and secure day.